Doing a video today on how CERN constantly references mythological and literary stories in the names of their experiments, the names of their machines, in statues and plaques they have around the facility, however you want to describe it, at the CERN facility. And I'm starting with this picture. I have a few pictures to get through, and I'm going to try to keep it brief about everything because I always overextend my videos. And I'm starting with this one because it kind of conveys the overall idea I want you to keep in your mind as I'm going through the other stuff. And I'll read this, and the main point I want to highlight to me is at the bottom of this little plaque they have, but I'll read the entire thing in case there's, something important to one of you guys that I didn't necessarily pick up on. Nataraja. Known as the Nataraja, this particular form of the dancing Shiva is one of the greatest gifts to the world of art. Shiva symbolizes Shakti, or life force, in the Hindu trinity. He is the creator, the sustainer, and the destroyer. Beyond the Nataraja's artistic form lies a profound meaning to be comprehended at many levels. The Nataraja in Ananda Tanadava shows him dancing the universe into existence, sustaining it with his rhythm and dancing it into extinction. Creation is sparked by the vibration of the drum in the right hand, protection or sustenance by the open palm of the front right arm, a gesture of assurance that grants freedom from fear. The fire in the left arm dissolves the universe while the front left arm points downward to the lifted left leg. The solace of the worlds, the dwarf representing ignorance, is trampled under the right leg. The auroral represents the cosmos, the sun, the moon, and the stars revolving in perpetual and fiery motion. Ananda K. Swami, seeing beyond the unsurpassed rhythm, beauty, power, and grace of the Nataraja, once wrote of it, is the clearest image of the activity of God which any art or religion can boast of. More recently, Fruitajav Capra explained that modern physics has shown that the rhythm of creation and destruction is not only manifest in turn of the seasons and in the birth and death of all living creatures, but is also the very essence of inorganic matter, and that for the modern physicist, then Shiva's dance is the dance of subatomic matter. It is indeed, as Capra concluded hundreds of years ago, Indian artists created visual images of dancing Shivas in a beautiful series of bronzes. In our time, physicists have used the most advanced technology to portray the patterns of the cosmic dance. The metaphor of the cosmic dance thus unifies ancient mythology, religious art, and modern physics. So that's the main thing I want. I know it's a mouthful, and some of it in the top paragraph I would pay extra attention to, but the main thing is, in our time, physicists have used the most advanced technology to portray the patterns of the cosmic dance. The metaphor of the cosmic dance thus unifies ancient mythology, religious art, and modern physics. So, unification of ancient mythology, religious art, and modern physics is the thing I want you to keep in your mind. So they're obviously seeing a parallel between the experiments that they're doing and the things that they're doing technologically and the meaning that's conveyed in mythological stories. Artistic form lies a profound meaning to be comprehended at many levels. So at many levels, there's different levels you can look at this, and at religious stories. And one of them, believe it or not, is scientifically or through the lens of physics. And that's probably the one I'm least literate in, but you can look at biblical stories like they're telling you physics equations. That's probably the craziest part. And there's guys like Carl Jung, right? Psychologists who basically look at religious and mythological stories through as like allegories or metaphors that explain great meaning or psychological truth. And the point is, man, when you try to talk to the average person about this stuff, they look at you like you're crazy or like it has no meaning. Some of the most well-funded, big scientific institutions on the earth acknowledge this parallel between ancient mythology, religious art, and modern physics and psychology. You know, they're acknowledging it. So to me, and that's basically what the occult is, from what I understand of it. Like, the occult is basically like mapping out these patterns and how we think, feel, and act creates what's around us, and how it, like, it's mapping out like truths across multiple contexts, multiple scenarios, and at different levels, from like the individual to the planetary to the internal to the group to the governmental to the corporate. It's trying to map all that out and show how they all run parallel to each other. That's the best I can explain it. These are very complicated topics. The plaque I just read you is around this Shiva statue. Everyone knows the Shiva statue. It's just another thing, like, this institution's known for physics and scientific exploration, yet they make constant references to mythology and stories. And that's what I don't always necessarily reference myth in in how I like to look for truth and teach truth. I like to look at like movies and video games and stories, but in essence it's the same thing. Mythologies are just grander stories of the past, you know what I mean? And religion's like, in the essence, the same thing. And when I try to teach people or show people like what a story that they like is trying to tell them, they always get quiet. They always think I'm insane or dumb. Honestly, like, most people don't get it. Yet these people, they keep us fighting over, like, you know, God versus atheism, and these people acknowledge that there's a parallel between science and religion. Anyways, in 2004, a 2-meter statue of the dancing Shiva was unveiled at CERN, the European Center for Research in Particle Physics in Geneva. The statue, symbolizing Shiva's cosmic dance of creation and destruction, was given to CERN by the Indian government to celebrate the research center's long association with India. Okay, so up next we have one of the experiments at CERN called the Atlas experiment. Most people know who Atlas is. But again, the whole point of this video is to just show you how, like the plaque said, they're drawing upon myths in their technological experiments. They see a connection between what they're doing scientifically and what the myths are saying. So that's pretty profound. That's kind of crazy, and most people don't even think about that. And there's a whole conspiracy surrounding CERN, and like when you look at stuff like this, it gets to be a little more believable. I'm not really going to explore those claims too much, maybe a little bit, but the point is, they don't distance themselves from the occult, from religion, from myth, and that's basically what the conspiracies surrounding them involve. And they obviously, in their own projects and plaques and statues, reference this stuff all the time. So Atlas is one of the 7 particle detector experiments constructed at the Large Hadron Collider, a particle accelerator at CERN in Switzerland. Okay, so the fact that it's just named Atlas is the thing to take away from that. And most of us have heard of Atlas. This is just a brief description of it. I'm sure you could, if you really knew all about Atlas and explored it and knew a lot about that particular CERN experiment, you could probably find a parallel between the myth of Atlas and that actual experiment, and like what it's doing on a subatomic level, or whatever they're really trying to do with that particular experiment. Again, that would take so long to research and hours to explain, and I'm not scientifically literate enough to do that for you in a meaningful way. In Greek mythology, Atlas was a titan condemned to hold up the celestial heavens for eternity after the Titan Maki. Atlas plays a role in the myths of 2 of the greatest Greek heroes, Hercules, the Roman equivalent being Hercules, and Perseus. According to ancient Greek poet Hesiod, Atlas stood at the ends of the earth in extreme west. Later he became commonly identified with the Atlas Mountains in northwest Africa, and was said to be the king of Mauritania. Atlas was said to have been skilled in philosophy, mathematics, and astronomy. In antiquity, he was credited with inventing the first celestial sphere. In some texts, he was even credited with the invention of astronomy itself. So, again, it's going to be hard for me to explain to you why they named that experiment Atlas and what it has to do with the story of Atlas. But if you looked in depth at each experiment, there would be something there, I can almost guarantee it. The point of this video is just to show you the fact that they're naming huge scientific experiments that seemingly on the surface have nothing to do with myth, and they're naming it after myths. So there's obviously, it means something. That's all I'm trying to say here. Okay, here's another one. Another Greek one, I'm pretty sure. Icarus. Icarus experiment. Icarus is a physics experiment aimed at studying neutrinos. It was located at the Laboratory Nazionale del Gran Sasso. Jeez, man, I'd probably butchered that. No longer operating, it was refurbished at CERN for reuse in the same neutrino beam from Fermilab as the Mini Boon, Micro Boon, and SBND experiment, which is right here. In Greek mythology, the Latin spelling conventionally adopted in English ancient Greek is the son of the master craftsman Daedalus, the creator of the labyrinth. Icarus and his father attempt to escape from Crete by means of wings that his father constructed from feathers and wax. Icarus's father warns him first of complacency, then of hubris. Okay, yeah, this makes sense. Asking that he fly neither too low nor too high, so the sea's dampness would not clog his wings, nor the sun's heat melt them. Icarus ignored his father's instructions not to fly too close to the sun. When the wax in his wings melted, he tumbled out of the sky and fell into the sea, where he drowned, sparking the idiom, "Don't fly too close to the sun." There's probably more to the story, and again, the central message here is they're naming stories after myths, and what does that mean? And my guess, like a lot of the condemnation that comes with science, like we used to see those like ads on the internet, like those dumb ads, like has science gone too far? And it shows like a Photoshop picture of an animal with like 20 legs. And yeah, that's obviously a joke, but that's a classic justifiable criticism of science, particularly the hubris part. You know, his dad warns Icarus of being complacent and like being satisfied with mediocrity, I guess, and that would be flying too low. But then he warns him of hubris, which is like pride and overconfidence, flying too high, close to the sun, being so wise and prideful that it's like you become a danger to yourself and everyone else. And science, like who knows what they're really experimenting on there. Obviously, all technology has had catastrophic military applications like nuclear bombs and biological weapons, and you know who knows what else. And you know they're messing with particles at like the lowest level, and you know who knows what like that's really capable of, especially when that sort of scientific thought is applied to like military application. I don't even know what that would look like. I'm just giving you my guesses here. Alif experiment. Alif was a particle detector at the Large Electron-Positron Collider. It was designed to explore the physics predicted by the Standard Model and to search for physics beyond it. Another experiment at CERN. Well, let's see what that's all about, what it's named after. Alif is the first letter of the Hebrew word emet, which means truth. In Jewish mythology, it was the letter Alif that was carved into the head of the Golem that ultimately gave it life. Alif in Jewish mysticism represents the oneness of God. So, you know, again, in context to that scientific experiment at CERN, I don't know what that means. I don't know enough about the experiment to necessarily tell you. It's just weird that they're naming their stuff after stuff like this. Like, what? gave life to the golem, you know, and I'm not saying it's necessarily nefarious or evil, but it's strange, and most people, if you talk to them about religion or myth or literature and like the meaning of it all in relationship to like their personal life, in relationship to psychology, and in relationship to science at the most extreme, they're not going to be receptive of it at all. They're going to think you're, most people won't. Maybe, you know, they'll open up to it eventually, but it took me a long time to even acknowledge any kind of meaning or value in religion. And, you know, again, in relationship to the scientific experiment, I don't really know how it makes sense, but it's saying Alif here means truth, and when it was carved into the head of the golem, which the golem is like, that's like a husk, like not a real person, a bot, like an NPC, like a shell of an individual, not a real person. They're basically fake. They've been downloaded, program. Like you could say, the unconscious mind is like the golem, right? And the truth, when it was carved into, if that letter or word represents truth, and it was carved into the head, and that gave the golem life, it's basically saying to the slave and to the ignorant and to the unconscious, the truth will give you life. So that's my way of interpreting that little story. Again, in relationship to the CERN experiment, I don't know what to make of it. It's kind of weird that they're smashing particles together and stuff and naming it after like stuff like God, and it gave the golem life. Like, I don't know what that means. Here's another one, Alice experiment. Alice is one of the 7 detector experiments at the Large Hadron Collider at CERN. The other 6 are Atlas, CMS, Totem, LHCb, LHCf, and MODEL. So again, just to take away from that, Alice. And I don't have it, but there's an actual, how I know they're referencing Alice in Wonderland is because there's an official image that they released, and it shows Alice, the literary character, standing there looking at this like gateway thing. And that's like, they released that. That wasn't just someone who made that. So it's not just a coincidence that it's named Alice, and it's not any other Alice, it's the one from Alice in Wonderland. And how I said, so now this isn't necessarily a myth, this is just a literary story, but it's still true in the same way how they're making parallels between literary stories and scientific experiments. And I often look at literary stories, video game stories, which is still kind of literature, it's writing, you know, in the dialogue, and movies and TV shows, and try to extract what those mean emotionally and psychologically and personally. I don't really often think of it scientifically because I'm not that scientifically minded. I don't have enough background to like pick up on those things, but I'm sure they're there. Obviously they're there because people like this are naming their machines after it and their experiments after it. But it just goes to show how it doesn't necessarily have to be a myth. It could be just a book or a movie that you watch or a TV show. Here we got Through the Looking Glass and what Alice found there. Also known as Alice Through the Looking Glass or simply Through the Looking Glass, is a novel by Lewis Carroll and the sequel to Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, 1865. Alice again enters a fantastical world, this time by climbing through a mirror into the world that she can see beyond it. There she finds that just like a reflection, everything is reversed, including logic. Running helps you remain stationary. Walking from something brings you towards it. Chessmen are alive. Nursery rhyme characters exist. Through the Looking Glass includes such verses as Jabberwocky and the Walrus and the Carpenter, and the episode involving Tweedledum and Tweedledee, the mirror which inspired Carroll, remains displayed in Charlton Kings. Again, it's interesting that they're naming this experiment with literary stories that talk about basically opening portals into another dimension or another reality. And that's where the conspiracy of CERN comes in. People think that they're doing that. And I don't really know I don't know if they're going to let demons through or what the spiritual side to it is really. I know that sounds insane, but when you start to see what they're naming their stuff after and like the kind of attitude and appreciation they have for stories like this, so much so that they're going to name their machines and experiments after it, I don't know what it means. It's strange. Climbing through a mirror, everything is reversed. Just very strange. Alright, here's one I could be reaching on. I could be wrong about this, but I thought it was worth including. This is another one that doesn't reference myth. It references like a story. I guess a myth is a story, but it references like a less highly esteemed story. It's not like a former religion myth. It's just like a television show. Anyways, Gargamel was a heavy liquid bubble chamber detector in operation at CERN between 1970 and 1979. It was designed to detect neutrinos and antineutrinos, which were produced with a beam from the proton synchrotron between 1970 and 1976, before the detector was moved to the superproton synchrotron. Again, I don't know what all this means in relationship, but it made me instantly think of Gargamel, the fictional character from the Smurfs. He is an evil wizard and the sworn enemy of the Smurfs and the main antagonist in the show and comic books. His main goal in life is to destroy the Smurfs to turn them into gold. Gargamel and his cat Azrael. I wonder where that name comes from. I'm not going to look it up now, but it's something to think about, because that obviously sounds like it looks almost like Israel, except it's A-Z instead of I-S, but it looks and sounds like a mythological name in and of itself. So even if that's not related to CERN, it's something still to think about, why there's an evil wizard that can turn people into gold, and he's trying to, and that's the name of his companion. The Delphi experiment. Delphi was one of the four main detectors of the Large Electron-Positron Collider at CERN, one of the largest particle accelerators ever made. Like the three detectors, it recorded and analyzed the results of the collision between LEP's colliding particle beams. There's a lot of stuff about Delphi, but this is what I've heard of it. Like it says right here, Delphi is perhaps best known for its oracle, the Pythia, and Cybele, or priestess at the sanctuary dedicated to Apollo. According to, Aeschylus in the prologue of the Eumenes, the oracle had origins in prehistoric times in the worship of Gaia. And I probably butchered a lot of words there, but the point is, again, they're naming scientific experiments after, not necessarily the Oracle of Delphi. From what I understand, it's a city, but that city has a lot of like religious, mythological, spiritual significance to it. The totem experiment is one of the 7 detector experiments at CERN's Large Hadron Collider. The other 6 are Atlas, blah blah blah. I've read that already. It shows an interaction point with CMS. The detector aims at measurement of total cross-section, elastic scattering, and diffractive processes. So, totem obviously has a religious, mythological, hierarchy, symbolic value to it. I had a picture from Wiki like I do with all the other ones, but for whatever reason I didn't open it, or I missed it or whatever, but you can look that up on your own. Just another thing, totem poles go back, obviously have mythological or religious symbolic significance to them, and it's another experiment named after totem. This is an experiment, but where the web was born. In the offices of this corridor, all the fundamental technologies of the World Wide Web were developed. Started in 1990 from a proposal made by Tim Berners-Lee in 1989. The effort was first divided between an office in Building 31 of the Computing and Networking Division, CN, and one in Building 2 of the Electronics and Computing for Physics Division, ECP. In 1991, the team came together in these offices, then belonging to ECP. It was composed of two CERN staff members, Tim Berners-Lee and Robert Callou, aided by a number of fellows, technical students, and cooperatant and summer students. At the end of 1994, Tim Berners-Lee left CERN to direct the World Wide Web, W3C, a worldwide organization devoted to leading the web to its full potential. The W3C was founded with the help of CERN, the European Commission, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, the Institute, and the Advanced Research Projects Agency, ARPA. In 1995, Tim Berners-Lee and Robert Callou received the ACM Software System Award for the World Wide Web. In 2004, Tim Berners-Lee was awarded the first Millennium Technology Prize by the Finnish Technology Award Foundation, the CERN Library, June 2004. Sorry, I butchered a lot of that. This font it's not a very good quality picture. It's pretty hard to read. The point is, so a place that talks about opening portals, referencing myth and religion, basically occult symbolism all over their technological facility, was responsible for creating the World Wide Web. Pretty interesting to think about. Most people, I never really wondered where it came from or what it was about or who made it. Here's a Google article I saw just when I was going on. This is actually recent. I was just going to search something on Google, and it says, I just thought the wording, the language used was interesting in relationship to CERN. It said, detecting dark matter at CERN, how the Higgs boson opens up a portal to new physics. Some people would just look at that and say it's crazy, but when you put it into context with all the plaques they have, all the statues, all the symbols, all the names of the experiments, and the conspiracies surrounding them, it's weird that they choose to word things like that. Opens up a portal to new physics. I feel like they do that on purpose. I don't know. That's just something that stopped and made me think. I'm not necessarily saying that's evidence of anything. Here's an online article about kind of the conspiracy surrounding CERN and whether or not them opening a portal is believable or not, or justified or not, that theory, if it has any weight to it. I didn't read the whole article, just a couple statements from it. Even if you don't buy into the portal stuff, there's still like symbolic significance to the fact that they're referencing myth and religion all the time. This is one of the more out there ones, but it's a little believable. Has the Large Hadron Collider finally opened the gateway into hell and summoned some form of extra-dimensional demon into our world? That's one of the conclusions drawn by conspiracy fans from a rather alarming picture of clouds over the LHC, Large Hadron Collider, on June 24th. Conspiracy fans have long believed that LHC is on the verge of summoning Satan or of crashing an asteroid into our world, and claim that CERN's new Awake experiment may have opened a doorway. Are you concerned yet? If not, you should be, says religious conspiracy theory fans Freedom Fighter News. They just began running this crazy amount of energy through the Awake experiment. That's another interesting name to name something, Awake. You know, it's not necessarily a myth reference. It might be. Who knows? I don't know the origin of that word. But it's just interesting, Awake, you know, I don't know. They began running this crazy amount of energy through the Awake experiment. This is an actual picture taken on June 24, 2016. The image is not photoshopped and is directly over CERN. This insane ball of energy is located over the Large Hadron Collider, and some were reporting they could see faces in it. So, again, that looks pretty insane. And when you look at, like, what the occult is, it's like mapping out psychological and emotional and spiritual things, often through stories and symbols, and a lot of it has to do with like how our energy is used. A lot of it has to do with energy and like our thoughts, emotions, and actions, right? And it's just weird how like, you know, this is an insane picture. Like, why is this over the Large Hadron Collider? What are they doing with this energy? Did they create that? You know, it's probably beyond weather modification, because I don't necessarily think CERN's involved with that, although that is a real thing. Just something to think about, man. I don't know what to tell you about that. It's just weird, especially when you put everything else about them into consideration. Lastly, this could be speculation. I'm not 100% this is why they named CERN, but I've heard this before, and I thought I might as well include it while I'm talking about everything else that has to do with this. Cernunnos is the conventional name given in Celtic studies to depictions of the horned god of Celtic polytheism. Cernunnos was a Celtic god of fertility, life, animals, wealth, and the underworld. I know in sort of like Western stories, we think of like horned stuff as automatically bad, and I'm sure that's a little bit different with, you know, myths coming from other regions of the world. Like, I'm not necessarily always going to say it's nefarious. Again, it's just weird. And this isn't even absolute, but obviously the word CERN is like the prefix in Cernunnos. And the mythology Cernunnos is from is sort of the mythology of that region that CERN is located in, from what I understand. I could be totally wrong about that, so don't, like Swedish, Switzerland mythology, I don't necessarily know what their religions of the past looked like, but I think it's Celtic. I could be wrong about that, and if it is true, then that just makes it a little more believable that the connection between Cernunnos and the name of CERN is real. Anyways, that's all I gotta say. Thanks for watching, guys. Let me know what you think.